Welcome to Drill Down Earnings. We have quarterly results from KLA, the artist formerly known as KLA 10 Core. It's an important semiconductor test company. Let's talk about these quarterly earnings. This is the business story behind one stock on a move. I'm Cory Johnson, Chief Market Strategist for Epistrophy Capital Research. So we care about KLA for a lot of reasons. They have inspection tools that check out semiconductor wafers after they're made, as well as checks out the photomasks and substrates that allow them to be made. It checks the metrology equipment, making sure the dimensions are right. It measures the thickness of film, those tiny, tiny measurements we hear, the size of human hair or whatever. Those are the measurements these guys actually do. They even give us a classification review system for checking the quality of semiconductors pre and post manufacture. So their first quarter earnings in 2025 tell us a lot about spending in the industry, because you can't make semiconductor wafers without testing those wafers, and you can't test them without KLA. But we want to dig into the business here. Let's go further than Wall Street. Wall Street doesn't understand all that. They just like a beat or a miss, and this was a beat. Better in revenues and better in earnings, non-GAAP earnings at least, than Wall Street expected. But we dig a little bit deeper. Let's look at the numbers here. So revenues of $2.84 billion. That was up 19%. When you look at the results from KLA, you really can see the swing into the downturn and the hard swing out of the downturn. And so now with 19% year-over-year growth, that's great. Their guidance of $3.75 billion previously just shows they beat their own guidance. I guess it's easy to do when you set your own mark. But earnings per share, powerful because cash flow is powerful as well. Cash flow from operations of almost $1 billion. Free cash flow of $935 million. So a lot of the operating profits are turning into free cash flow for this business, and they're using it, among other things, by buying back stock. And we'll talk about the impact of that in a second here, because you can really see the smart management of this company, smart financial management, certainly. In the conference call, they talked about some near-term challenges, but continued growth in the semiconductor market, and some of the reasons they expect to see this growth and this wave, this rebound, continue to happen. Now, you can see the operating margin, 39% operating margins. That's just great. And they also manage this pretty well during the downturn. When we think about all the businesses they're in, look, it's really about semiconductor process control. That's 90% of the business. And that business made the hardest turn with a recovery of over 20% in the quarter. So, on a year-over-year basis, I should say. So that's really strong. The stock initially jumped. Somebody put in a trade at a big number, but it corrected a little bit. It ended up kind of flat in after-hours trading, but that's after a 55% rise in the last year. So that's pretty good for this stock. Now, I mentioned the buyback. I don't usually focus on these financial metrics, but this, you can see how smart the management team is here, because they knew they were in a downturn. They knew their stock was cheap. And so they were using their cash and free cash flow to buy back shares and reduce the share count. If the share count had stayed at where it was in September of 2021, I made a chart to show us that, the earnings would have in this quarter would have only been $6.05. Instead, by buying back shares, the earnings were $7.01. That's 16% better earnings to the shareholders because they were buying back shares. And so that should help the stock price as well. And again, I think that's a company that knows the cycles that they are in and how to use their financial tools to make themselves benefit better when they come out of that cycle. And you can see it in these results. So on the conference call, Rick Wallace was asked about concerns about this cycle, because in the world of AI, the world that we're in right now, the chip manufacturer that matters above all others is Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC. And if TSMC is the most important buyer, are these guys kind of in a jam? What can they see about demand with only one company doing the cutting edge 2 nanometer demand? Is the demand only from NVIDIA putting orders in for TSMC, or is it more broad-based? And the answer we got was kind of interesting. It's kind of both. While the business is concentrated at TSMC, it's showing lots of different types of businesses within TMSC for KLA 10 Core, KLA, I should say. And well, listen to what Rick Wilson had to say, the CEO of KLA.
Suppliers of leading edge, I think that the business would be spread across them. But right now, there's one supplier in the leading edge, and what they're seeing is significant demand above, as they indicated in their call, what they anticipated. And a bit of we anticipated 2 nanometer demand to be strong, but the fact that there's additional demand for 3 nanometer leads us to some pretty robust forecasts through the rest of this year for the bookings and also into 2025. So I don't think it's a function of the number of players. I think it's a demand driver. And as you know, it's across a number of players.
So it's not a wide variety of customers, but it's a wide variety within that customer. And that gives them positive vibes about the future for KLA. All right, so what's it all mean? What's the one number that tells us a whole lot? Let's do that. So KLA 10 core, KLA reporting first quarter 2025 earnings. Your essential summary tells you that $2.84 billion in revenues in just 13 weeks was up 19% on a year-over-year basis. Very strong, with nearly $1 billion in free cash flow. But to drill on earnings bite, the one number that tells you a whole lot is 21%. So their biggest business grew at 21%, pulling up all of their revenues at 19%. A profitable quarter, strong quarter, and more to come from KLA. All right, thanks for checking out Drill Down Earnings. I'm Cory Johnson.